Hey guys, Mikoshi here. Today we'll be discussing the budget Chieftain armor stacker. So this video is going to be when you get into the build. Now you must understand that armor stacker is going to be a beast of its own. So when we're talking about budget, we are talking about slightly more expensive compared to other builds. However, I am not talking about mage blip here. I am not talking about mirror items. We are going to be with just a few divines. I don't want to say a number because it can fluctuate no matter when you watch this video. Now this is going to be for the Chieftain. They are the sign versions. Overall, sign is going to be better. Short answer. However, sign are going to be more expensive to get into. So if you want to go into armor stacker with kind of a budget, and then you might make more currency, but you're not expecting to be drowning in currency, then Chieftain I think is going to be the better option by far, and it is extremely scalable. Okay, don't think that Chieftain cannot be scaled. It can be scaled to multiple mirrors. Now there are a few changes compared to 3.23, which was like the peak of popularity for armor stacker, but now there are still reasons to play armor stacker. I mean, you can delve if you want, but especially tier 17 maps, which are quite hard, and some juice content, some bossing. It's just about having fun, right? The biggest change is going to be the mana cost. This is very annoying as it makes the low budget, a bit higher budget to get into, because you need a specific set of ring, especially if you are Chieftain armor stacking. Now, you don't really need those minus 25% flask anymore, thanks to the rings if you have them properly and the rest of the set. I will be discussing it in the rest of the video. Now, if you want to watch a video about a sign, you can always watch my video. There are a few explanations that are old between 3.23, however, I have changed the POB. Now, if you have any questions about this build, you can always let me know in the comments down below or join our Discord. We have all the POBs in the Discord. There's going to be a POB, of course, in the description, but if you want more POBs, more explanations, and all my updates are going to be on the Discord, so you can always join them. I'm also active there, so you can always, talk to my community or me. Now, if you have questions on sign stuff, and you see that I don't have a lot of videos, I do suggest watching Big Daddy's content. He is kind of like the god of sign armor stacking. It's pretty much all he does, and he makes excellent videos, very, very informative. All right, so let's actually get into the video.
The armor is a defensive layer that reduces damage from hits from physical damage with a maximum cap of 90%. It is important to note that the physical reduction, the percentage, is actually based upon the amount of damage received. However, once you reach very high up in the 80s, 90%, with the 90% being the maximum cap, there's going to be pretty much no more reasons for you to invest so much resources or currency into your build to increase that armor, except if you're an armor stacker, because they can transform that armor into actual damage. So how do we do that? We're going to be using something called the Replica Dream Feather. It's a sword which grants you 1% increased attack damage per 450 armor. Considering you're going to have armor at maybe 400 to 500,000 on the low end, up until the 5 million maybe on the high end during League, and even 10 million in Standard, that is going to be a fuckload amount of damage, especially if you dual wield those swords. On the defensive side, most armor stacker are going to go for CI, which is the Chaos Inoculation. It's a keystone which grants you a maximum life of 1. However, you are going to be immune to chaos damage. This means we will not have HP, we will only have energy shield as our main source of, well, HP, and complete immunity of chaos. This means we do not have to increase any resistance for chaos, as well as if we're able to shift certain amount of damage into chaos, we basically don't receive any damage. That is why Chaos Inoculation is so strong. A lot of armor stacker actually go for dual wielding Replica Dream Feather to deal the most amount of damage possible. However, I think on the low end and even mid budget, Aegis Aurora, which is a shield that replenishes 2% of your armor when you block, is going to be the best option for us. This shield, if you have a high enough chance of blocking, will pretty much grant you infinite hit pool against small hits. So as long as it's not a one shot and you're able to consistently block, you are immortal to small hit. You can go into a mob pack with 100 mobs and you will not die. The rest of your defense is going to be quite basic. We have a 90% physical reduction as well as a 90% elemental resistance as capped. This is very, very powerful, and I'm telling you, you are not taking any damage from enemies. You will have two options as Ascendancies when you're playing in Armor Stacker as a Marauder. The first one is going to be the Chieftain. This will grant you a free melding of the flesh with 0 downsides thanks to the Velocco Ascendancy, as well as you will have a lot of cold and lightning resistance just by scaling your fire resistance thanks to Tazalio. What does Tazalio do is for every increase you have in fire resistance, half of it also goes to cold and lightning. So with your purity and the huge amount of fire resistance we will have, because it's going to synergize with the rest of our build, we're basically not going to have to think about any of our resistance. However, the rest of our Ascendancy points are going to be quite useless, and I often only do 2 or 3 labs, and I don't even go for the last one before quite a while, although it is a small increase. The second one is going to be the Juggernaut. This grants you a free kind of mini Transcendence thanks to Unbreakable, but on a budget, the 8% armor is not that high, and the free melding of the flesh without the downsides, I think usually will, in the end, grant you a higher amount of defense than going for the Juggernaut and the Unbreakable. However, with the rest, you will have quite a lot of speed even if you're slowed thanks to the rest of the Ascendancy. You have additional accuracy, and Juggernaut grants you the possibility of going for Dori Ani. Now, if you wanted to go for Berserker, the Berserker Ascendancy, I don't think it's going to be quite good on the low and mid end. However, on the high end, it is possible. I have played and I have an Armor Stacker Berserker. It does a tremendous amount of damage. But for now, we will only stick to the Chieftain. I think it's going to be the best option for any type of player. All right, so how do we actually scale all that armor? How do we get to the 500,000, the millions, the 5 millions, the 10 millions? Well, we're not only going to be scaling armor. We're also going to be scaling evasion thanks to something called Iron Reflex. It's a keystone which converts all evasion rating into armor. However, our dexterity will not provide any bonus to evasion rating. Considering that we are always running for dexterity because we're always short, this last part is kind of useless for us. All we want is convert all that evasion rating into armor. And that is very good because first of all, you can scale evasion as well as armor, which will increase everything. But all that evasion rating that is then converted to armor will also be increased by armor. So you can increase your evasion, then evasion is transformed into armor, and then all that armor is increased with, well, armor. Scaling it with aura effect will increase it by a ton. That's why Grace is going to be the main aura of this build. It is so strong, so powerful. You always want Grace. Another mechanic we'll be using in our build is going to be the overcap mobs. Some specific mods can increase evasion or armor depending on the percentage of a certain resistance that is overcapped, so above the maximum resistance. Considering we're going to have a 90% cap, this means if we have a 91% resistance, we have a 1% overcap. The strongest versions of armor stackers are going to be for cold because it increases the evasion and then it is then increased into armor. However, because we're going to be a Chieftain, we're going to go for the fire because as we saw, increases in fire will also increase the rest of our resistance, which is going to be very, very useful. The main unique we're going to be using is going to be something called the Formless Flame. Formless Flame will give us the armor is increased by overcap fire resistance. Considering we have 500 fire resistance, this is going to be a 500% increase in armor, which is going to be a ton more armor, a ton more defense, a ton more attack damage. An important thing to understand for armor stacker is it's kind of like a subgenre of aura stackers because auras play pretty much the most important role in our build. They increases, well, our auras as well as our armor. Okay, our armor is directly affected by our auras, the increased effect of them. So how we scale all of that effect? The first one is going to be by scaling an aura's level. As you know, the most important thing to do with a gem is not increasing the quality or corrupting it, etc. It's really getting more levels. A level 1 gem compared to a level 20 gem is not the same thing, while a level 20 gem compared to a level 30 gem is not the same thing either. That's why we're going to be using multiple setups to increase the level of especially Grace. This is the gem you have to have the most amount of level, as well as determination. We're going to be doing that thanks to the March of the Legion boots. What are they? They are boots which socketed aura gems are supported by a level 25 blessing. Level 25 blessings is basically an aura which is time-based duration. So you click your aura and it's going to be on for 10 seconds without any increases. And I think we're in our setup, it's going to go up to 18 seconds. So you click your Grace and you're going to have Grace for basically 18 seconds. It has increased effect when it's a divine blessing, as well as March of the Legions gives you between 3 to 5 extra levels to your gem. Add corruptions to that and add the empower support, your grace will climb easily up until the 27 to 32 levels. For the rest of our auras, we're going to be using a +2 corruption on our Chaos Spirit, or a +2 on our Formless Flame, which are going to be quite easy as they are quite common uniques. For the rest, it's going to be in our tree. Our tree is basically only us increasing our aura effect. That's why you're going to see most armor stacker have the same tree. They all go for the increased aura effect and increased mana reservation efficiency nodes. And our clusters, which is basically half our points, are only going to be the 3 passive skills with the 6% increased mana reservation efficiency, as well as introspection, which is going to be the notable passive skill on our clusters, which grants a 10% increased effect of auras on you. Aegis, if you are not dual wielding, will be one of our main defenses. Thanks to it, whenever we block, we basically have we have all of our energy shield replenished, which effectively makes our effective hit pool infinite. However, it does not protect from one-shots and massive hits. So be careful of that, and we're still going to have to scale the rest of our defense accordingly. So how do we use and abuse Aegis? As we saw, it replenishes our energy shield by 2% of our armor when you block. This means you're going to have to block to use Aegis. So what is block? Block is going to be a layer of defense that will entirely prevent any hit damage. However, the maximum block is 75%. So our goal is going to get to 75 as high as, well, to get to 75 basically. However, because we're armor stacker and we have to scale so many other things, it's going to be quite detrimental to scale 75% just like that. That's why we're going to be using something called glancing blows. It's a keystone which doubles the chance to block attack as well as spell damage. However, you will take 65% of damage from blocked hits. And trust me, it is better to take 65% of our damage from blocked hits and doubling our chance to block than scaling it to 75% ourselves, as we are losing so much resources. So block is divided in 2. It's attack damage and spell damage. For the attack damage, 32% will come from Aegis by itself, so you have the 32%, and then you will have prodigious defense, which is a notable from our clusters, for a total of 35%. If you double that thanks to glancing blows, it's going to end up being 70%. You can also go for 2 prodigious defenses in your clusters if you have the courage and patience to craft them, for a total of 76, which will stop at 75. So between 70 and 75%, it is going to be more than enough to abuse Aegis for attack damage. On the spell damage side, we're going to need 25% from our Tempest Shield. It's basically kind of like an aura, which grants you 25% chance to block spell damage on your shield. 8% from Arcane Guarding, which is going to come from your tree, and then 3% from Prodigious Defense. You can always go for 2 Prodigious Defense for a 6%, for a total of either 72 or 78, which is capped at 75% chance to block spell damage. Once you get that, I am telling you, the moment you have like 3000 energy shield and have a nice amount of armor and resistance, you can go into Simulacrum, AFK, and just not die. It is also important that you guys understand that aura stacking will not be only for increases in armor. We have other types of auras that we have on us. We have our purities, which will increase our resistance, our maximum resistance, as well as, yes, our armor. Haste, which will make us a lot quicker, as well as attack quicker, which is an equal amount of increase in damage. We have Wrath, which is going to be pretty much our main source of flat damage. We are scaling so much lightning damage thanks to Wrath. It is so strong. Without Wrath, you are basically losing 80% of your DPS, as well as an attack called Smite. Okay, so Smite, yes, it is an attack, but it's also an aura. Okay, so you're going to see some armor stacker playing Smite as their main skill, but they might use Smite as a secondary skill. Why would they do that? Is whenever you hit an enemy with Smite, for 4 seconds, you have between 1 to like 200 added lightning damage. Considering we have, 3 or 4 times the effect of our auras, it is going to be a ton of flat damage. If you go check on POB, without Smite on, you are losing half your damage. So Smite is going to be half your damage. Very, very important. That's why I like to use Smite as my main skill, because I don't like attacking with my main skill and having to think about hitting Smite. If your main attack is Smite, you will have the aura perpetually. So very strong, very powerful. Even if you're a fire-based attack like Molten Strike, you're still going to need Smite. It's going to be half your damage. The main point of the build is going to be to scale the aura effect and scaling armor, which means it's going to be hard to scale anything else. Although we will be using the precision aura, it's going to be hard to have 100% crit chance, and we're going to have to scale some crit multi as well. This means we're often going to go for two choices. Either we're going to go for the Resolute technique or the Elemental Overload keystones. So let's read them both. Resolute technique means that your hits cannot be evaded, however, you never deal critical strikes. This is very good as you do not need to think about accuracy and you do not need to think about critical strikes, but you lose, well, the crit multi. However, when you pair it with other keystones such as Precise Technique, you have 40% more attack damage if your accuracy rating is higher than your life. Considering you have 1 life, your accuracy will inherently be higher, which means it's 40% more attack damage, never be evaded, and never deal critical strikes. Or you can go for the Elemental Overload, which will grant you 40% more elemental damage if your skills have dealt a critical strike in the past 8 seconds. However, your critical strikes will not deal extra damage. You might think, okay, well, it's then better going for Resolute Technique because I don't even need to scale accuracy. Yes, that is true. However, Resolute Technique and Precise Technique are going to be, well, especially Precise Technique, is going to be quite far for us, and it is not useful unless we are using projectile-based skills, because Precise Technique is very close to point blank, which will grant you another 30%. So if you're using a projectile-based skill, it might be better going for Resolute Technique, Point Blank, and Precise Technique. However, especially earlier on when we are not fully, we don't have all of our points, it is going to be better to go for Elemental Overload. With all of that aura effect, with precision, we will be 100% accuracy capped, as well as 1 crit every 8 seconds. You basically don't even have to scale any type of crit chance because you will attack quickly enough that every 8 seconds you will consistently hit at least 1 critical strike chance and get the 40% more elemental damage. So we're going to go Elemental Overload, but if you see for Lightning Strike or Molten Strike that I go for Resolute Technique, Precise Technique, you'll understand why. Finally, let's talk about Berserk and Rage. We all know that Chaos Spirit, the Titan Gloves, were nerfed from 1 Rage for every 100 recovery to 300 life recovery. This is quite the bummer. However, Berserk is the strongest buff in the game. It grants you 44% more DPS as well as 30% more speed, which is completely bonkers. However, because we have that 300% life recovery, it's going to be quite hard, but thanks to our armor and evasion mastery, which every 4 seconds regenerate life equal to 1% of our armor and evasion over 1 second, and considering we have hundreds of thousands and even millions of armor, you're basically going to get like 20 or 25 rage every 4 seconds as a boost. This will be a tremendous buff. As well, we have a fire mastery, which will grant you 1% life regeneration for 1% fire resistance overcap. Considering we are a fire resistance overcap stacker, this is going to be a lot of life, okay? So that with the evasion and armor mastery, we're going to get a nice amount of rage. However, because Chaos Spirit will transform that life recovery into rage, we cannot transform the life recovery into energy shield recovery with Zealoth Oaths, which means for us to regain our life, so our energy shield basically, we're going to need energy shield on hit or energy leech. This is going to be very important for our survivability.
All right, so let's quickly go through the gear and the POB. So the gear is going to be the Formless Flame setup. You could go for a rare helmet and go for the Val Regalia with the mod, depending on your budget. But when you are on a lower budget, just go for the Formless Flame, and it synergizes extremely well with the Chieftain. We're going to go for the Replica Dreamfeather Eternal Sword, which is going to be the main source of our, well, which is the source of our damage. And then we're going to go for the Aegis Aurora for the infinite hit pool and pretty much immortality. Especially if you're farming Simus and stuff like that, this is going to be the best choice. Now, if you are just walking around doing harder content, even maybe tier 17 maps, where you're not really afraid of getting one taps or like getting jumped, but it's more like dealing enough damage, you could definitely drop the Aegis and go for 2 replica swords, especially if you have the Forbidden Flesh and Flame combo. You already have an effective hit pool of pretty much 500,000, so that is quite good. It is not going to be as tanky, obviously, as a Transcendence setup, which is, either going to be the next video I'm going to make, or I could just drop a link to one of Big Daddy's video. But it's going to be extremely tanky. They are extremely tanky builds. Now for our amulet, the cheapest one you can go is Jinx Juju. You can go also Ashes, which grants you a lot of damage, or the Onyx. It's the other one that has 2 implicits that are from either, that are from the 2 Uber bosses. I keep forgetting the name, but that is often more expensive than Juju. The rings are going to be kind of like the most important thing you need to make sure is you need the implicit at the 5% reduced mana cost of skills, and then 8% reduced mana cost of skills as explicit. Just get them twice. You don't need the 6%. 6% adds a lot of divines to it, but if you don't really are that much on a tight budget, you can go for them. For the gloves, Titan gloves, for Rage, I did not use Rage in the showcase, like in the background video. I was testing like a build without having to spam the Grace because of the disappearance of the 25% reduce. However, it makes the budget a bit higher, so for this, we will be still running a classic. Immortal Flesh, Leather Belt. The first upgrade you really want is pretty much just getting a Mage Blood. March of the Legion, either +1 or +2 implicit, it's going to be the best. And then for your flask, you want the Ruby, you want the Jade, Basalt, Silver, and then Stibnite, right? So that's going to grant us a lot of armor, a lot of evasion, onslaught, permanent onslaught, and then more fire resistance. For the tree, very classic tree. It's always clusters and more clusters. On a budget, you're going to go for the large clusters with like lightning stuff, lightning damage, penetrations, and then add your introspection depending on how many points you have. And then the more currency you have, you're going to swap those large clusters into voices. Now there's the debate of going either 5 passive. I don't think it's good going for 5 passive. I've discussed with some other armor stacker players, and they all said like they stick to the normal rare clusters until they have enough currency to get 3 passive voice. Now, a few changes for the Chieftain. We did add a Militant Faith to make it that we have 0% cost of Grace. We add it here because this is where you get the most amount of devotion. The rest, it's very classic. We have our Iron Reflex, Unwavering Stance, mana reservation, mana efficiency. Here we got physical damage taken as Chaos because we are immune to Chaos, so that's quite good. We've got the Thread of Hope to get, Glancing Blows, which is going to pretty much make us nearly immortal, right? Elemental Overload. Here we went for Mana Mastery. I did have a setup where I went for the reduced cost right over here and went for the Glancing Blows, and you don't need to use Thread of Hope if you want to try that out if you don't have the currency to get a Thread of Hope. And right here you have the Shield Mastery for the block chance, right? If you're running for double swords, right, you can drop this part of the wheel as well as you can drop Tempest Shield, and you can just add either an aura or even just take off the reduce here. Save a lot of points actually. Take off the reduce and you'll just spend maybe 100, 120 mana every time you want to use Grace, which is a very smart setup. That's kind of it. It's very simple. I mean, if you really want in-depth explanation on the mechanics of what an armor stacker is, I already made a video. And if I made it every time I made an armor stacker video, it would just be quite redundant. Yeah, sorry, the Ascendancy, I'll just add to it. Pretty much the most important thing is going to be Tazalio, which half your fire resistance goes as well to cold and lightning, which is quite good because all you have to see, as you can see here, all you need to do is concentrate on the maximum amount of fire resistance and you'll be fine. Here we have quite a low amount. We will go higher. Just the moment you start spending a bit more, you're gonna reach the 300, 400, 500s quite easily. And then here, maximum fire resistance also applies to maximum cold and lightning, which is basically a free melting of the flesh without the downsides. Here we don't have enough aura effect to get 90-90. However, the moment you just get a better, like a 3 passive voice, you will get to 90% quite easily. So on that note, that ends the video right here. I hope you enjoyed. I'm quite sorry to make the video late. I was extremely busy with school and I did not have time to play any Path of Exile. But I will try to make my videos a bit more consistent, but I can't promise anything because this, as I said, is the end of my studies and, quite hard. So, good luck making your armor stacker and most importantly, have fun.